This is Dave McCain with the Right Tree Genealogy. I'm doing another DNA video. This time it's on recombination, on generalizing what happens and what recombination is, because you may see a sibling show up and not match a cousin. You're going, well, how do they not match them? They've got the same parents. This is going to explain it generally. I'm going to make it as simple as I can on this one. Recombination is not difficult to understand, even if you've never studied biology. You just have to graphically understand or realize what's going on. So what I'm going to do is show a couple of chromosomes, and I'm going to oversimplify it, just making simple blocks. This is to graphically represent what happens in recombination, and I'll explain what I've done. So over here on the spreadsheet, your father would give to you DNA from your paternal grandfather, your paternal grandmother, and your mother would give from maternal grandfather and maternal grandmother, or basically your mom's mom and dad and your dad's mom and dad, basically what this means. So I've also represented the different chromosomes here in the sense that chromosome 1 and chromosome 22. I just picked two of them to show. What I'm doing here is each chromosome has some of your mother and some of your father. This is a graphical representation, simplified, just making the blocks the same size. You're going to get a little variation in this. I mean, they could be very small or very long segments, but I just want to show to you what recombination is, so to make it as simple as I can, so that hopefully when you get done watching this video, you'll have enough of an understanding why one person matches a cousin more than another. That's just the way the randomness of our DNA is reconnecting. So let's go to your father's chromosome 1. He has his father and his mother, each of them receiving DNA from their parents. So he has a segment of his chromosome for his father's side and a segment of his chromosome for his mother's side. That's what this P and M is. This is his paternal line, or his father's side. This is maternal line, or his mother's side. Same thing on the mother's side. Her father's line and her mother's line. So each one of them would receive DNA from each parent. And I'm going to mix this up just enough to show that things do happen randomly. Let's do a copy of this. And let's say at the top of this, he receives 3 parts of his father's father and 1 part of his father's mother. Then down here on his mother's side, he receives every bit from his mom's mom. Now, on his second chromosome, his chromosome 22, he received for his maternal line 3 portions of it, and he received 1 portion. Now on his father's side of this, he received the middle 2 segments here. So on this line of chromosome number 1, he received 3 parts from his grandfather on his father's side and 1 part from his grandmother on his father's side. And on this one, he received the whole mother's side of the chromosome from his grandmother, from his mom's side. On this chromosome, he received 50-50. Beginning of it was from his paternal grandfather, and the end of it was from his paternal grandfather, but the middle of his chromosome was from his paternal grandmother. Now likewise, in the mother's side, he received 1 part from his paternal grandmother's father, and he received 3 parts from his paternal grandmother's mother. Now let's go ahead and do the other side. Okay, so I finished filling out the table, and I'm going to go back through it again. I put a recombinational block together that represents what each of your parents received from their parents, which was from their grandparents. So for the maternal side, from the mother's side, her grandma's DNA on the first half, her grandfather's DNA in the middle segments on chromosome number 1, and then again her father's grandmother on the end segment. And then on her mother's side, she received her grandmother from her mother's side and her grandmother from her mother's side on these segments. And in the middle, she received the DNA from her maternal grandmother's father, or paternal line. Then on chromosome 22, I kind of mixed it up a little bit more. It alternated back and forth between the maternal grandfather and the maternal grandmother, alternating back and forth. And then I had the maternal grandmother take over the first 3 segments, and then the maternal grandfather take over the last segment of chromosome 22. What I want to voice here is each person randomly gets DNA from their grandparents, and you don't know what you're going to get. You're going to potentially get all of one grandparent or part of one grandparent. You just really don't know what you're going to get. I've populated the first child's blocks so you can see what would happen. I'm going to explain it, try to show you what's going on there and what happens with the DNA. And so this is child number 1. You can get a random mix of it, and I mixed it up pretty good here. On chromosome number 1, he could only receive from his paternal grandmother's mother, since that's all he got. He can only give him that, or his father or his paternal grandmother. So basically you can only get, the key point here is, you can only receive from your parent what your parent received from his parents backwards. When a DNA recombines, you're only going to get information that your parents have. You're not going to show, if you show up a higher number than your parents, it's likely that there was, the way it recombined, it made it look bigger. There was some errors that took place in calculation, or your other grandparent side, one of them may have been related in some form. But basically, you're only going to match the person equal to or less than your parents. And I want to say what I did, and we'll fill out table number 2 so you can see how that progresses. But I want to show you one completed. So when you look at it, this is a completed table, and it looks very colorful. I'm going to try to simplify this. On chromosome number 1, his father has this DNA to give, this darker blue and this light blue from his father's side. His father's mother's side, he can give this. Well, when he gives the DNA, it's a mix of his father and his mother goes together. So on chromosome number 1, just like up here in the grandparents, he would give from his father's side, he would give this segment and this segment because it was here. So he had a choice of giving this one or this one. He gave this. When I say he had a choice, when the DNA recombined, it either pulled it all the way through or it gave it this way. When the DNA was pulled together, he gave this segment here, and he had a choice of giving one of these two, and he gave this one. Had a choice of one of these two, and it recombined into this. And then over here, it recombined to this. Same thing on the mother's side. When she could give this or this, she gave this, which is her maternal grandfather's mother. In this section, it's the one of these two. It turns out to be this one, maternal grandmother's parent or father. This one could give one of these two colors, gave this one, and could give one of these two segments, and it was this one. Now on chromosome 22, it was the same thing. I'll just make it pretty quick. He could give one of these two colors, he gave this one. He could give one of these two colors, he gave this one. He could give one of these two colors, he gave this one. He could give one of these two colors, and he gave this one. On the maternal line, the mother. So on the mother, I should state this. The mother gives the bottom section here, and the father gives the top section here on the way this table is. On the mother's side, she can give either one of these two, and she gave this one. Either one of these two, and she gave this one. either one of these two, and she gave this one, and either one of these two, she gave this one. So you can only receive DNA that your parents have. You're not going to receive it from any other grandparents that they didn't receive. Now, child number 2 has the same options as child number 1. One of these two, one of these two, and one of these two. And what we're going to do is we're going to say that in this case, the child received every bit of identity, and this happens on occasion. A child will actually receive all the DNA from one segment of it. It doesn't separate, it doesn't recombine. And on the mother's side, we're going to say he received every bit of this, or she, from the mother's side in chromosome number 1. This is not a very likely scenario. I'm just trying to show you the differences. Now on this other one, on chromosome 22, we're going to say that this child received a mix very similar to what the other child did. So in this case, we're going to put this. Okay. We completed the 2 children's DNA that they received, and it was at random as the interaction between the chromosomes remixed, just to show it in block form, to show what could happen with 2 separate children born of the same parents. Let's go back to the table. Comparison right here. I've drawn a quick table for the comparison between child number 1 and child number 2, and put a little table down here for us to say yes, they are the same, or no, they're not the same, just so you can see a comparison of what each child got. And again, it goes back to the point of why they may show up as not matching someone the same way. Again, this is a simplified form trying to explain what recombination does and what the differences are when 2 children receive from the same parents different DNA. Let's go back to this on the table I just created. This is a comparison of child number 1 and child number 2 on the father's side. So you look here, and they're no. So that's a no. On the mother's side, you look here and here. That's a yes. Going across. So here's the father and the father. Yes, that's the same. How about down here? The mother and the mother. No. Father's side. Here's the father and here's the father. No. On the mother. Here and the mother here. Yes. So then you go over here. Here's child number 1, father's side, yes. Same. Mother's side, this and this. No, they're different. We're just going to highlight in green each one of the yeses. And this is just by chance. I made this up as we went along. I actually did not plan for it to look like a zigzag there. So that's chromosome number 1. So now let's look at chromosome number 22. And what does this do? Here's the father and the father. So that's a yes. That's a match here and a match here all the way across. So that's a yes, 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 yes. So now let's color in green. The segments. So what this does for visual graphics standpoint, child number 1 to child number 2, on the father's side, child number 1, child number 2 on the mother's side on each chromosome. Again, you get DNA from each parent. How do they compare? Is this kind of a zigzag pattern here? It's possible if this person matches a cousin and it happens to be on the paternal grandfather's side here, so this child would have it and this child would not have it. The key is here is you're going to get a lot of matches, a lot of direct matches. And so when you have someone that are siblings, your closest relative to you is really, you're closest to each of your parents when you look at your DNA. Each child has a certain amount to each parent, which is about 3,500 centimorgans, and you got 2,500 or thereabouts comparison to your siblings. So let's go back to this. When I look at this table, the child's father and the child's mother inherits DNA from parents, which is each grandparent. So basically, as you step down, it's a tree backwards. So you go from you to your parents, that's 2. You go from you to your grandparents, that's 4, and you keep doubling that backwards. Now, yes, there's situations where it goes back together in certain communities, and over time, going back in time, eventually everyone goes back to more of a smaller population because there were fewer people that existed. I know this can be complicated. I would try to simplify this as much as I can. I'm saying it again here, you get pieces from each grandparent that go down to your parents, that go to you. You only inherit what each one of your parents give you DNA-wise. Those get recombined, and you can lose grandparents over several generations or a few generations. You don't specifically inherit 25% of each grandparent, 50% of each parent. Now, you're 50% compared to your parent. You are not 25% of each grandparent. It's roughly that, but I have seen an instance in my own daughter that she's 30% from 2 different grandparents, and that leaves her teens to the other ones. And instead of the 25% each, you know, she's into 20, 16. She's got one grandparent she's into 16% of. Each child can inherit different pieces, which means you match differently to each one of your cousins. Now, I hope this video was useful and informative to you. The intent is to cover basics of recombination and DNA and what can happen between siblings, that you don't get all the same DNA even though you have the same parents. Please consider subscribing, liking, and clicking the bell notification for future videos. There are other videos above me here. Over here is an icon that you can click on to subscribe. Let's continue our learning together.